Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much to Inish and Tanya for very kindly inviting me to speak to you today about the archaeological site of the Rose. So my talk is called Glory is like a circle in the water, Shakespeare words and water at the archaeological site of the Rose Playhouse. And just to explain, just before I go on to my next slide, the red circle outlines the size and the shape of the rose. So it was a 14-sided structure, 22 meters in diameter. This is the inner wall of the rose. The archaeological remains are underwater. This maps out the 1587 stage when the rose was built. There used to be a red light flashing to mark out the 1592 stage, but when I took this photo, the red light wasn't working. So that's what that image is, and I'll come back to that a little bit later in the talk. So welcome to the Rose. So I'm going to be giving a brief overview of the Rose Playhouse, a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to talk about Henry VI, Part 1, and then just a brief conclusion. So that's me. I'm at that point, I was playing Rosalind at the Rose, and I'm sitting on the railing that overlooks the archaeological remains. And this is just another really nice introductory picture. That's the late John McHenry. He was very famous for playing Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet and Franco Zeffirelli's film. And behind us is a mural of Bankside, south of the River Thames. So the Rose Playhouse was the first playhouse to be built on Bankside, and we have a wonderful blue plaque. So it was voted for by the people. So we've got the lovely plaque, and that just indicates that the Rose was built in 1587. So this is Bankside today. So Bankside is quite a posh area now, and we've got the Millennium Bridge, and we've got the walkie-talkie building there. And if you were just to continue down the Bankside, past Shakespeare's Globe, and turn left down the Bear Gardens and right onto Park Street, you would come across the Rose Playhouse. So that's what the Rose looks like. Just a couple of years ago, I took that photo. So the Rose is under a bit of a construction with the building above, and hopefully they'll be opening up very soon again. So this is my little John Norden map of Bankside. So the Rose would have been south of the river, which was known as the Liberty of the Clink. So that meant that what happened south of the river was free of the city father's jurisdiction. So, for example, you had the theater in Shoreditch in 1576, but with Henslowe building south of the river, he could do what he wanted. So he and his son-in-law Edward Alleyne owned some of the brothels, and there was the bowling alleys, the stews, and so then you would have had the little playhouse there. So the wet and marshy landscape of the Bankside provided the dynamic setting for Philip Henslowe's 1587 Rose Playhouse. So basically, Philip Henslowe leased this plot of land from St. Mildred's Parish on Bread Street in London in 1585. He took out a 20-year lease. Now, on the property was already a little house. Now, that was owned by a gentleman called John Chumley, and he was a grocer. So Chumley goes into a business partnership with Philip Henslowe, and Chumley pays Henslowe £816 over a period of 8¼ years. And he says, you know, in return, I want half of the box office receipts, and I want a victualling house, a catering house. So he was making quite good money with that. And this is the deed of partnership. So these wonderful papers, the Henslowe Alleyne documents, are kept in the archives at Dulwich College. This is Henslowe's half of the contract. So Chumley would have had the top half, it would have been torn in two, and then one half given to Chumley, one half given to Henslowe. And then when they fitted together, that was your binding contract. And that's Dulwich College. So that is where all the papers are kept, including Philip Henslowe's diary, which I've looked at, and we were talking earlier about books, and books can be their own materiality, their own archive. So not just for their contents, but I know that Philip Henslowe wrote in that book. It's got his DNA all over it. It's so exciting, you know, his handwriting. So it's such a great record of not only of all the plays that took place and how much money they made and about costumes and props, but it is living materiality as a part of Henslowe. So Edward Alleyne is also a very important figure. He was the lead actor in The Lord Admiral's Men. He was Philip Henslowe's son-in-law, and he was a business partner. So again, you know, they went into business partnership with other playhouses like the Fortune, north of the river, and he starts Alleyne's College of God's Gift. And that's where all of this documentation is today. So he founded the College of God's Gift on the 21st of June in 1619. Now, the Rose continued for about 20 years. We know that Henslowe was trying to negotiate the renewal of his lease with St. Mildred's Parish, but we know from documentation that the Rose was abandoned by about 1606, and then the building was just torn down. So then, over the years, the site was just built over. And skipping way ahead now to 1957, there was a building on top of the Rose site called Southbridge House. And that was torn down in late 1988. And a brief archaeological investigation was allowed to take place. And this is what they found, the remains of the Rose. And they actually were so surprised that so much of the Rose remained intact. And these are the foundation columns of Southbridge House, and they just narrowly missed the Rose stage, so we were very fortunate. But because of the wet and marshy landscape of the Rose, it actually preserved the remains incredibly well. Now, Sir Laurence Olivier was on his deathbed, because lots of celebrities like Sir Ian McKellen and Dame Judi Dench, they were coming around to the Rose with the Save the Rose campaign. And Sir Laurence Olivier, again, taking the text of Henry V, he changes it and he says, can a muse of fire exist under this ceiling of commerce? Please help us stop the second Elizabethan age from destroying the glories of the first. Cry God for Harry, England, and the Rose. So it was really moving, and there's some footage with people crying and applauding. This is a really moving speech that Sir Laurence Olivier made. Look, Sir Laurence Olivier doesn't want to leave us. He's so with us in spirit. Oh, I've got something about Zoom coming up on the screen here. Oh, there we go. So this is just a couple of examples. I have a few examples of artifacts that were so well preserved because of the waterlogged environment. So this is a baluster, and actually Sam Wanamaker, who was responsible for the reconstruction of the globe, he took this as a template for the balusters that are around the middle gallery at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre on Bankside. So again, just a little bit of Jove's stout oak with some references, some literature references there. This lovely cosmetic item that would have been used in everyday grooming, typical of the 16th and 17th century. Interestingly enough, a lot of what they discovered in the Rose Playhouse, they actually discovered in the Mary Rose. So shoes, leather shoes, and grooming implements and combs. So again, it's about this beautiful waterlogged environment. And of course, the beautiful rose ring with the inscription, "Think of me, God willing." And I actually wear a replica of that ring. And it's interesting looking in Henslowe's diary, he actually writes in a rose, a gold ring. So he's talking about props and costumes. Maybe it was that ring, we don't know. But it's nice to think about. And so when I was doing not Henry VI Part 1, but we did Bernard Shaw, St. Joan, a couple of years after, 2013, I decided I was going to take that sentiment on the artifact and put it on St. Joan's costume. Joan, even though it was Bernard Shaw, we made Joan a punk goth. We kind of modernized the show. And so, again, it's kind of taking the literature off the object and putting it on my costume. And that's just a picture of what that looked like. Well, not me on the shirt, but punk Joan. So going back to the archaeological investigations of the Rose, so the way in which the Rose then had to be preserved was very tricky. I could go into great detail about this picture, but it would just take too long. So basically, the Rose is currently buried under Buckland sand, concrete, and water. And sticking up from the site are these monitoring piezometers. And then with the piezometers that come out of the water, there's Dr. Jane Siddell. She's the inspector of ancient monuments. And she, once a month, she takes water samples. And what she's looking at is the, I suppose, the materiality of the water. We want to be in a minus zone with the oxygen, because if we're not in the minus zone, then lots of things can thrive and live in the water, which will attack the very delicate archaeology. So it's me outside with one of our volunteers. So sometimes we do a little bit of meet and greet. And this is just me engaging with the publics. We have our open days, so I tell the story of the Rose. Again, we do some Elizabethan dressing up. And we have some very good friends who come along to visit us, like Sir Ian McKellen, the late Alan Rickman, the late Suzanne York has been with us. And then my friends and I created a really fun sort of show about the Rose called Shakespeare's Secret Playhouse. And it premiered at Canada House on the 2nd of February in 2017. And I'm Canadian, so that was a really great moment for me to have the premiere at Canada House. So then, my background is purely theater, but when people were coming to the Rose and asking me about the archaeology, I didn't have a clue what to say. And I thought, well, I better educate myself. And, you know, I thank God for George Birkbeck, who really believed in educating people, the working class, because I was working during the day and studying at night. And I got my degree, my master's in archaeological practice, and I wrote my dissertation about the Rose. And I got distinction. And then that led to me going to Portsmouth, the University of Portsmouth, where I actually engage with the remains of a World War I submarine chaser through performance as well. I'll be talking about that in tomorrow's session. Oh, and just there she is. There's my wonderful World War I submarine chaser. So, Henry VI, Part 1 is a very special play. It was written for the Rose. It premiered on the 3rd of March, 1592. And this is me playing Joan la Pucelle. And what's really exciting about this particular play is not only am I portraying, it's this mime-tic relationship between me and the Elizabethan actor, most likely a boy actor who had been playing that role, but it's also that mime-tic relationship with the historical Joan of Arc. So you've got sort of three histories reflected in the archaeological preservation water, and also reflected on the architecture, so that landscape of architecture, water, and archaeology and performance. And again, we know that Henry VI premiered at the Rose because of Philip Henslowe's diary. There it is there. Of course, they've got the Julian calendar, so it really is the 3rd of March, 1592. Now, this is a wonderful photo, again, showing this mime-tic relationship between performers, architecture, and archaeology. Our bodies, so this is the opening scene, it's the funeral of Henry V. And so our arms are outstretched. So we are forming a mime-tic relationship with the architecture. So this is Rose Court. This was built after the archaeological dig in 1991. So we've got the actors having this mime-tic relationship with the architecture, but it's having a mime-tic relationship with the archaeology, because that is being reflected. So you've got this mime-tic relationship, which I love this photograph so much because of the preservation water. This is the red rope light that we switched off for that particular scene, and then these are the piezometers coming out of the water. So again, a very dramatic landscape. And this was really exciting for me. I was asked to find a quote for the Rose when the people would come in for the open days. I thought, well, I want to do a quote that is a part of a play that was written for the Rose. And when I was reading Henry VI, Part 1, I thought, you just couldn't make this up. Glory is like a circle in the water. How could Shakespeare have known that his words would have been so prophetic when he was writing this for Joan? We literally have a circle in the water. So again, mapping out the 14-sided polygonal structure, 22 meters in diameter. Oh, that's our little statue of Shakespeare there in the water. So what I thought I would do is I'm just going to recite that little bit that Joan says. So forgive me if it's a bit dramatic, but Joan is dramatic. Assigned am I to be the English scourge. This night the siege assuredly I'll raise. Expect St. Martin's summer halcyon day since I have entered into these wars. Glory is like a circle in the water, which never ceaseth to enlarge itself, till by broad spreading it disperse to naught. With Henry's death, the English circle ends. Dispersed are the glories it included. Now am I like that proud insulting ship, which Caesar and his fortunes bore at once. And that was said while I was indicating that red rope light. So to say that in the Rose, with an actual circle in the water, the heavens aligned. That's all I can say. So now the Elizabethans had the same idea, because Thomas Nash, in 1592, he says how it would have joyed brave Talbot, the terror of the French, to think that after he had lain 200 years in his tomb, he should triumph again on the stage and have his bones new embalmed with the tears of 10,000 spectators at least, at several times, who in the Tragedian that represents his person, imagine they behold him fresh bleeding. So Thomas Nash is aware of the historical coming to life again. And we had the historical, and we had the Elizabethan, and we had the modern day in our production. So the Elizabethans were very much aware of that as well. Oh, now this is really great. So Julian Boucher was one of the archaeologists who excavated the Rose. They found a stone cannonball. And Julian thought that perhaps this could have been used as a sound effect. So when everything's going wrong for her, she says, the regent conquers and the Frenchmen fly. Now help ye charming spells and periaps and ye choice spirits that admonish me, and give me signs of future accidents. You can imagine someone backstage rolling this stone cannonball to make the sound of thunder. It might not have been the stone cannonball, but it's a really nice idea. And, why not? Let's let our imaginations fly and think that it could have been. And again, I just like this photo, again, because of that mime-tick relationship. Reflected in the water is the historical Joan, the Elizabethan actor playing Joan, and me as the modern actress playing her. And again, the everything, the archaeology is reflecting the architecture. So again, I just really like that mime-tick relationship. And again, this was towards the very end, when the French are fighting the English. And again, if you look at the architecture, you see the shadows. So the shadows are also a part of that literature. So it's that landscape of shadows, architecture, rose court up above, the archaeology, the psalmeters coming up, the reflection, so the disturbance of the water. So us as modern actors, we're disturbing the archaeology because our reflections are in the water. And yet the archaeology is disturbing the water by its presence. So our kind of reflected presence mirroring the actual presence of the archaeology underneath. And then just to conclude, that was me and Dr. Jane Siddell. We had a 30-year anniversary gala in 2019. So, because the Rose, they started the excavations in December 1988, and they finished by May, 15th of May, my birthday, in 1989. So we were at, there's if you've never been to Southwark Cathedral, I highly recommend it, because not only is it beautiful, but they've got a really nice statue of Shakespeare lying very dramatically, and Philip Henslowe is buried in Southwark Cathedral. He actually paid for his own funeral. And Shakespeare's brother is buried in Southwark Cathedral as well. So thank you very much for listening, everybody.